You know, when you hear the word Lapland, your mind probably jumps straight to snow-covered landscapes, right? Maybe the Northern Lights, and for sure, reindeer. But beyond these common tourist stereotypes lies a much deeper, far more fascinating reality. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the true history, the incredible survival story, and the ongoing struggles of Northern Europe's indigenous population, the Sami people. To make sense of all this rich history, we've broken today's explainer down into 5 clear parts. The people of Sapmi, adapting to the Arctic, the era of assimilation, resource extraction and climate, and finally, fighting for the future. Okay, let's dive right into section 1, the people of Sapmi. We're going to define exactly who the Sami people are and where they actually live. So, to really understand the Sami, we first have to understand their geography. They inhabit a vast, freezing, and honestly beautiful northern region known as Sapmi. Now, for a long time, outsiders inaccurately refer to this massive area, which spans all the way across the borders of 4 modern countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia's Kola Peninsula, as Lapland. But for the people who actually live there, it is and it always has been Sapmin. And that brings up a really crucial point about identity and language. For centuries, the English-speaking world and other Europeans used the exonym Lap or Laplander. That term actually got popularized way back in a 1673 book by a guy named Johannes Schefferus. But today, that term is widely regarded as highly offensive. The important takeaway here is that the people strongly prefer their own endonym, Sami. It's a word that linguists actually believe derives from an ancient Proto-Baltic word simply meaning land. So how many Sami are there today? Well, the total global population is estimated to be right around 80,000. To put that into perspective, the vast majority live in Norway, which has somewhere between 37,000 and 60,000 residents of Sami descent. That's followed by Sweden, then Finland, and finally, there's a much smaller, but still incredibly significant, community of just over 1,500 living in Russia. Now, here is a massive mythbuster for you. When we think of the Sami, we almost exclusively picture nomadic reindeer herders, right? But get this, only about 10% of the Sami population is actually connected to full-time semi-nomadic reindeer herding. Literally just 1 in 10. So you might be wondering, what are the other 90% doing? That perfectly transitions us to section 2, adapting to the Arctic. Let's see exactly how this population survived and diversified over thousands of years. To really grasp the Sami economy, we have to look back at a catastrophic global event. In 1349, the bubonic plague arrived in northern Norway. It came in via fleas hiding in wooden barrels of wheat and rye along those major European trade routes. The plague absolutely decimated coastal Norwegians. It left up to 76% of their farms completely abandoned. But the Sami? They were largely spared. Because they lived inland, were isolated from European trade, and lived on a diet of fish and reindeer meat instead of imported grain, they survived. And because they made it through, local authorities actually incentivized them to migrate out to the coast and safely repopulate those empty farms. This historic shift created a major socioeconomic division, and it's one that still exists today. On one side, we had the Sea Sami, who became the vast majority. They settled along the coastal fjords, totally diving into farming, trapping, and most importantly, fishing. On the flip side, we have the Mountain Sami. This is the smaller minority who maintained that traditional semi-nomadic lifestyle, traveling across the borders of Norway, Sweden, and Russia with their reindeer herds. And let me tell you, the Sea Sami became incredibly successful fishermen. Why? It all comes down to deep, generational indigenous knowledge. Traditional Sami fishermen didn't just drop nets randomly and hope for the best. They actually navigated by the hidden topography of the seafloor and these really complex tidal currents. It was an intricate science passed down through generations, a skill so specific that modern fishermen who just rely purely on sonar technology often completely struggle to match their long-term success. Okay, let's move into section 3, the era of assimilation. We're going to see how this centuries-long relative independence eventually collided with a much darker chapter in history. For centuries, Scandinavian governments kind of just ignored the Sami. But starting in the 19th century, authorities began viewing them as a primitive people who needed to be civilized. This mindset kicked off aggressive Scandinavization and Norwegianization policies. An 1889 mandate actually forced Sami children into compulsory schools where speaking their native language was strictly banned. By the early 1900s, if you wanted to buy state land for agriculture in Norway, you had to prove you spoke Norwegian and officially register with a Norwegian name. And to make matters even worse, During World War II, the retreating German army used brutal scorched earth tactics across northern Finland and Norway. They literally burned away the physical traces of traditional Sami homes and culture. The assimilation efforts weren't just cultural either. They were sometimes pseudoscientific and deeply, deeply violating. Shockingly, between 1913 and 1920, a Swedish race biology institute systematically collected research material from living Sami people. Because the Sami were deemed racially inferior at the time, these researchers went so far as to unearth human remains directly from Sami grave sites for their studies. It's incredibly grim. Thankfully, there's a slow but steady effort today to try and right these historical wrongs through a modern repatriation process. In 1997, after years of refusal, the stolen skulls of two 1852 Sami uprising leaders were finally returned and reburied. In 2019, 25 more skulls were reburied in Sweden. And looking ahead to May 2025, additional remains are scheduled to be repatriated to the Gammelstadt Cemetery. It's a vital process of returning human dignity to these communities, step by step. Now, while those historical wrongs are slowly being addressed, let's look at the present day and Section 4, Resource Extraction and Climate. Today, the Sami face immense, immediate pressure on their ancestral lands. You see, Sapmi is absolutely loaded with precious metals, oil, and natural gas. And because of that, the local ecosystem is basically under constant siege. You have mining operations pushing right into protected ecological reserves. You've got state-run logging industries clear-cutting old-growth forests, which totally destroys the lichen that reindeer desperately need to survive the deep winter. Government and NATO military bombing practice ranges have been built right on top of ancient reindeer calving grounds. And if physical destruction wasn't enough, there's also cultural exploitation. Parts of the tourism industry actually use non-Sami people to perform fake, quote-unquote, authentic ceremonies just to sell tickets. And it's not just local industry. Global disasters literally drift right into the Arctic, too. A really surprising and honestly tragic fact is how the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster impacted Sapmi. The radioactive fallout drifted north and was absorbed by Arctic mosses and lichens. Since lichens don't have roots, they pull nutrients and toxins directly from the air. The reindeer ate the radioactive lichen, and as a result, Sweden was forced to cull a staggering 73,000 poisoned reindeer that had become completely unfit for human consumption. We also have to impartially look at the really complex friction happening today between modern environmental goals and indigenous rights. For instance, in Piteå, Sweden, the government allowed the construction of over 1,000 onshore wind turbines. Now, while this is obviously a massive win for state green energy, the sprawling infrastructure effectively blocks ancient winter reindeer pastures. The United Nations has actually stepped in to criticize Sweden over this, pointing out that this unregulated industrial push directly violates Sami land rights. Which brings us to our fifth and final section, fighting for the future. Because the Sami are absolutely not just passive victims of history, they are actively asserting their rights on the global legal stage. Sami activists are successfully protecting their heritage through organized resistance. A fantastic example of this happened at Suhtesaja. The state attempted to build a massive global water bottling plant right at a sacred natural spring that also happens to feed into Europe's largest salmon river. The kicker? The project was planned without consulting the local Sami population, who make up 70% of the area. But Sami activists rallied, pushed back hard, and successfully halted the plant, saving a vital source of their traditional livelihood. They're also securing massive victories in international courts. Just recently, in a landmark ruling in October 2024, the UN declared that Finland had violated Sami rights by failing to consult them on prospective mining activities. What's truly fascinating about this legal victory is how the Sami won. They brilliantly defended their land not by relying on standard Western property laws, but by leveraging international standards of cultural rights and the fundamental right to maintain their traditional living standards. So, as we wrap up this explainer, we've seen how the Sami survived the harsh Arctic, outlasted the plague, endured decades of cultural erasure, and are now fiercely fighting back in the modern era. The really crucial question we want to leave you with today to think about is this. As the whole world races to secure green energy and new resources, how can modern nations balance this urgent global push with the vital, undeniable need to preserve ancient indigenous land rights? It's a complex puzzle for sure. Thank you so much for learning with us today, and we'll see you in the next explainer.